Episode 168 Above Ground Podcast. Life is a Highway with Pieter Van Winkle.
Disclaimer. The hosts of this podcast, Timothy Patrick and Will Foley, are by no means medical professionals. However, having lived experience with mental illness themselves, they have gained useful perspectives on common mental health issues that some of us struggle to overcome on a daily basis. By sharing their stories, they hope to create connection. By creating connection, they hope to help you find your purpose. And through purpose, we can all begin to build the foundation for positive mental health. This is Above Ground Podcast.
Coming at you live with real conversations about mental health from the perspective. It's time for Above Ground Podcast. Now your hosts, TPP and Will Foley.
Hey, what is up, everyone? Welcome to episode 168 of Above Ground Podcast. Above Ground Podcast, because you can't serve below. Our interview with Pieter Van Winkle is coming up right after I go through a couple of important things. First off, thank you to everyone who came out to the Summer on Central concert series on Saturday. The Summer on Central concert series was brought to you by Nippertown WAMC, which happens to be the 518's NPR public radio station. The Linda, which happens to be their performance space, put on an incredible 4-week concert series with some incredible bands. An Above Ground Podcast bookended the concert series, and we were there this past Saturday and had some really cool conversations, met a lot of cool people. Thank you so much for coming by, stopping by the booth, saying hi, coming out and supporting the band, supporting Nippertown, supporting local music, supporting your community. And in that area where that location is a pretty heavy traveled location, and there's a lot of homeless people that live down by there, and there's just all kinds of people in that community that really could use those services and do utilize some of those services. And then tonight, we are going to be at the Hangar on the Hudson in Troy, New York for the For the Love of Stephen for the Lost benefit and fundraiser. Today, August 31st, is International Overdose Awareness Day. As we know in this country, the opioid epidemic has reached proportions that no one probably ever thought about except for the people who've manufactured a lot of this stuff, and especially for the people who are selling fentanyl and swinging fentanyl and killing people. Like, it's just all about money. It's just all about money and not about caring about people and taking advantage of a bad situation and getting your profit margins up. The little tiny salt granular amount that it takes to kill you is just damn scary. So tonight, For the Love of Stephen for the Lost benefit. Stephen passed away suddenly, July 31st, 2020, leaving behind his family and his 3 children and many friends. There's going to be music. The lineup is Curious Comet, that's Nikki Chaos's alt-rock duo, the band Raisin Head, and also Brooklyn, New York band Lizzie and the Makers. That's going to be an awesome bill. I can't wait to see Nikki. I haven't seen her in a long time, so big shout-outs to Nikki. And please come out, $20 donation at the door. 6 p.m. the doors are, 7 p.m. show. Let's come out. Let's support. Come get your resources. Above Ground Podcast will be there with substance abuse resources and mental health resources. Come on out, support, show your face, say hello, and let's not lose more people. Okay? Get Narcan trained. There's Narcan trainings out there now, especially. So please go get Narcan trained, and let's save some souls, man. Let's not lose any more people. So tonight, Hangar on the Hudson. Hope to see you all right now. Episode 168, Pieter Van Winkle. Hey, what is up, everyone? Welcome to Above Ground Podcast.
Above Ground Podcast, because you can't serve below.
No, you cannot. What's up, TPP? Good Sunday morning to you, buddy.
Likewise. What's going on, buddy?
Having a little Joe. Still shaking out the cobwebs from a road trip last night to go see Behemoth. Hail Satan. Yeah, it was a good show, man. Good show, good time, good food. Like, got to meet some cool people. It was worth the road trip, man. Sometimes you need those solo roadies. And speaking of solo roadies and the road and the highway and just all kinds of stuff, this morning we are joined by Pieter Van Winkle, who is a men's coach. He is a men's group leadership facilitator, and he's a musician. He's a dad. He actually. And we've got a good connection because of where I grew up and where he went to college and stuff. So there's a lot of parallels that go on here, man. Pieter, thank you very much for joining us this morning. And again, being 2 hours difference, I apologize for dragging your ass on the screen at 7 a.m., man.
No, not a problem. I'm happy to be here. Yeah, nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you, man. So,
welcome. Thank you.
I really want to get right to the meat of it because Timmy loves to use the metaphor for us as a car, and you wouldn't let your car happen to not have the oil changed. And that's kind of the way we look at ourselves. We got to look at our thoughts. We got to look at our patterns. We got to look at our emotions. We got to look at our physical health. And I recently watched something that you had talked about where you talk about life is a 3-lane highway. And I kind of wanted to start right there, man, because there was some really interesting stuff that I heard you say in that 4 minutes that I heard. And I was like, wow, that's a really cool way to look at it.
Wow. Yeah. It's crazy what stays on the internet. I remember talking about that a few years ago, and that was a minute ago. I think in that thing I was talking about the idea that moving yourself from sort of being call it reactive in the right lane, and then to being sort of, maybe I guess being creative and proactive in the left lane. And I was experiencing that in my life of shifting from the right lane, of being kind of getting pushed around by life, getting moved by whatever happened to me, and sort of other people dictating and what happened to me, and then realizing I really wanted to get this into a place where I could actually could I really create, could I make the life the way I wanted it to be, and trying to shift it over into the left lane for whatever that meant for me personally, and that was what I was working on at that time. And it's cool to have that brought back, because it has me wonder, am I still in the left lane? How am I doing?
Yeah. It's funny because when I heard you use that metaphor, I was like, yeah, I guess we kind of all, in reality, in certain parts of our life, are all playing Frogger. Because right. I find that certain parts, I don't know if I've ever been fully in the fast lane the whole time. You know what I mean? I think we spend a lot of time shifting lanes. And do you think that may be part of our problem? That maybe once we do we get scared? Is it that traffic stops us up ahead? What stops us from staying in the fast lane?
Well, that's a good question. And the fast lane isn't always fast either, is it? If we're talking about the left lane being proactive and creative, the left lane may, in this metaphor, actually be even slower in some ways, because to me, it doesn't have to be fast to be, and I know you're not saying this, but just, for the listener, it doesn't have to be fast to have it be useful, or to have it be soul directed, which is how I've come to think of that left lane. And I think what bumps us out of that is a lot of what you mentioned, fear, a sense that we have to be doing something, maybe the internalized voices of our parents, or our parents extra still talking to us, or our community, or people that we're feeling like we have to be like. I still, I don't know if we're ever done with it, but there's definitely times where I find myself wrapped up in, I'll come home and I'll say to my partner something like, I don't think that person likes me very much. And we'll kind of go down this hole for 20 minutes. And she's kind of like, I was like, so, I'm still just as obsessed as the next guy with whatever bullshit, is just got me sort of not directing my life. It's that doesn't matter, Pieter. What, keep going. What's next,
Do we ever get out of that bullshit though? Isn't that, because
right.
I think, isn't that the challenge of life, is to let the bullshit come up and see how we can play tennis with it and hit it back and forth over the net, maybe, in a way?
I couldn't agree more. I think it's totally fine to, well, the way I look at a lot of this, the way I see it, in terms of mental health, in terms of the way you guys are framing it, which is really, I like it, about living a functional life, living a life that is, high performing in that way of the car, is to not stop ever being neurotic or having neurotic voices or parts, but to just be aware of them as parts and to engage them and to sort of roll your eyes and laugh at them and go, well, there's my, sensitive part, or there's my paranoid part, or there's my warriors coming out, my critical part, or there's my perfectionist. So there he goes again. And just kind of like, I think it was Socrates said, the unexamined life is not worth living. So to examine our lives is not necessarily to solve them. It's simply to, like you said, hit it back over the net and recognize the dynamism that we're born with. I have lots of quotes, but there's another one that makes sense to me, which is, you can't get rid of the skeleton in the family closet, but you can make it dance. It's just to recognize, like, this is what I came in with, and it's okay. But if I hang on to that and embody that and see myself through that lens and don't let it go, don't shake it off, then there can be an issue. Then there can be a bit of then it's not this less functional and less soul directed.
Absolutely. I think you really nailed it with, it's similar to like talking about attachment, right? We can accept these things, but it doesn't mean that by accepting them doesn't mean that that's what we are. That's what all we do. It's just saying, these are the hurdles that I have, or this is the direction of the road. There's a curve ahead, but if I pay attention to what I'm doing and worry about what lane I'm in, then that should be our focus, right? Because I've said this to Will just recently, is, how hard is it to change your own mind? Can you imagine trying to change somebody else's mind? Right.
Right.
We can put stuff out there, sure, but, put it out there and then, close the door if you have to and just keep driving.
Yeah. It sounds like you're just saying, keep it on your side of the road. Recognize the wisdom that I hear in your statement is like, once you realize how hard it is to change your own mind, therefore you're not going to waste your time changing someone else's mind. You recognize that just being up against recognizing our own sort of foibles is work enough. And that being that we're going to try to recognize our own foibles, we're not going to try to solve it or change it, but be with it and direct it. And at times, ask it to gently, get out of the driver's seat, to, when the little boy is driving the bus, tearing down the highway, it's like, well, how about the father is going to come in and drive, or the adult of me or the soul of me is going to drive, because when you drive, this is how the relationship goes. And this is how the job goes. And this is how the argument with the boss goes, and it's not good. So, and having that self-compassion and that sense of, I one of the biggest things we can have that it's so hard for men to get is this sense of, I heard David White once say it as, wrap an arm around yourself and just say, it's not going so well, is it? And it had this wonderful way of describing it that made it sound like, because it's really hard for us to admit that we're off, or that we're coming at something from an unhealthy perspective, and to be able to just go like, gosh, I'm kind of losing it, or I'm kind of off, or I'm kind of struggling, or this is kind of what I do, and is so hard for men because of the whole sort of framework around shame and the framework around, trying to not look bad. That if we can just get that one thing in there to just go like, gosh, and have that sort of third person perspective with ourselves and that compassion, that can go so far to helping us get to the place that we're talking about. Because then you start to not trying to make everything perfect. You start not trying to conceal the ways that you're off or not having a good day. And man, if you can just accept sort of your foibles, it's like, then you can go really far, because we are just foibles in a way.
Absolutely. That's like more than half the battle, really, is, kind of uncovering it, As
Totally.
Will says, we're all in recovery from something.
Yeah, we're all in recovery from something, regardless.
Nice.
And recovery is one of those things that is just sort of, you're always in recovery from something. And that's the one thing that I think that we can take away from any of our interactions, is that regardless of who we are or where we are, we all have adversity. We've all faced adversity. We're either coming out of adversity, getting over adversity, or heading into an adversity a lot of times. Some of us, and we find common ground in the middle somewhere, but we're always going to face another thing. We're always going to face another challenge. I don't think life ever gets to be unchallenged, does it?
I don't know. I don't think so. It's almost like when you ask that question, it throws me off, because it's like the one of us, again, back to the parts, the one of us who wants it to be without challenge. It's so sort of suspicious. It's sort of like
why would you want that?
Yeah. Or like, and what map of reality are you sort of referencing that has you think that just up ahead, it's going to all be gone forever? I mean, sure, there's this sort of vague concept of enlightenment and all this kinds of thing, and maybe that is coming, but the one of you who is needing it to be that way, or saying it must be, or whatever, that attachment to outcome is suspicious if we have that.
Well,
so what I hear you is kind of prepping yourself for what, yeah.
Right. And therein lies our problem, is that our attachment, as the Buddhists say, that's where all our problems are, is being attached to all these things. And we just got to kind of let it go and do what we do and find our way, and not try to cause ourselves any more suffering than we need to.
Yeah.
I really want to kind of touch on this, because I've recently started listening to some Dr. Joe Vitale, who I had never really listened to before, but I've and this has come up, and I saw this on your website. It's petervw.com, where you talk about the soul, and I really want to ask this question: how do we know when it's our soul talking?
Totally. Early on, when we begin the work, or when we're caught in, let's say, a relationship that is challenging, it can be hard to hear the voice of the soul. So I'll give you an example. Let's say we're in a relationship, and let's say I'm in a relationship, and it's kind of one of these, Tim, you referenced attachment. It's one of these push-pull dances where, let's say oh my gosh, I got to get out of this relationship. I cannot be in this relationship anymore. It's not good for me. It's not good. So I break up with her, and then after a few days, I think, oh my gosh, or a week, like I can't believe we did this again. No, this time, oh, I gotta have you back. We gotta get back together. And then you get back together, and then a few days or a week later, it's like, oh my gosh, I gotta get out of this relationship, right? So it's like, each time if someone were to ask you, do you want to be back in the relationship? And you say, yes, I gotta get back in the relationship. Is that your soul talking? Yes, it's my soul talking. And then a week later, I gotta get out of this relationship. Is that your soul talking? Yes, it's my soul talking. Right? So it's like, we have this tendency to orient around getting rid of pain, and that the more this is how it has been in my life. The more we are directing our lives to get away from pain, the less likely it is that we're hearing a voice of soul. And so, in that example of where I am, I've got to get out of the relationship. Then once I get out of the relationship, I've got to get back in the relationship. Then I got to get back out. Each time, what's actually driving me is this sense of, I can't stand this pain, right? I can't stand the pain of being in. I can't stand the pain of being out. I can't stand so the voice, if you will, that is driving me is, sure, it's a very deep voice. Maybe it feels like a very sort of core voice, but it's actually different voices. But the fundamental sort of meta level dynamic that's taking place is, I can't handle the pain and the discomfort. And so then what's needed there is to be able to pick a pain, in or out, and or total honesty with her. Hey, listen, I'm a mess. I've got guys that want to be in. I've got guys that want to be out. One day I want to be with you. The next day I don't. You've noticed that, but I can't commit. And then even better, I won't commit. Like, obviously, I'm not going to say that it's not that I'm a victim of. And so do you see where I'm going? Is what I'm starting to do is I'm starting to take responsibility for my parts. I'm not saying I'm a victim of my parts, because some guys will then take the next step and they'll go, okay, I've got awareness of my parts. And then they'll go, well, I would commit, but I can't, because, I just can't. I'm a mess. I can't, like, I would if I could, but I can't, because, well, since that's not all the way there, that might as well not be there at all. The next step would be to say, I got a part that's a little boy and a lover, and he loves to be with you, and he wants to be in. I've got a wild man and a hermit, and just a kind of other part, and he can't stand to, and he wants to be out. And so what I'm going to tell you is, because I'm responsible for all these guys in here, I won't commit. I actually won't commit. It's not that I can't. I'm telling you that I'm proactively taking responsibility for all these guys and not going to put you through that. I won't commit. And so now what I've done is I've taken responsibility for the crazy. And then what can start to emerge after I've become willing to see and be and take ownership for all the guys that are talking. I mean, in recovery, you mentioned recovery, they talk about a fearless moral inventory. I mean, this is a fearless moral inventory, to be aware of who all is talking. And then what can slowly come up is, now that I'm no longer running from pain, and I'm no longer running to the savior outside of me, the woman's arms, or the other woman, or whatever, the grass is greener, now that can't tempt me anymore, and I'm not sort of beholden, like I can actually be trusted, not only by others, but by myself, then a voice can start to emerge. What do I actually want? And we start to learn through meditation, through being really quiet, through being really still, when we can't be rocked by pain or by circumstances, or by, in the Buddhist term, causes and conditions. We're just sitting. Then a voice starts to emerge, and we start to think, oh, I actually think that I actually know what I want to do next. And that gets closer to what I think of as the soul.
I get it. So in essence, kind of quieting the mind and quieting the outside world a bit, shutting down those extrinsic voices, so to speak, can help clear out the soul that speaks to us.
Yeah, we have to deal with the ways that we're sort of on the take or co-optable by our pains or our addictions, or, sort of, what's the word, like our campaigns to once and for all get the girl, or once and for all have this or this situation, or have, like, once we are no longer influenceable by that campaign and by those programs, and we're just willing to sit through it, only then can we begin to trust what comes up from underneath that. And so in a way, it's kind of an initiatory process of meeting our humanity and being with it rather than coming from it.
How do we know? Well, we've talked a lot about cognitive distortions, and we're going to talk more about cognitive distortions going on, Timmy and I, because we tend to have a lot of cognitive distortions. And I for myself, I know that a lot of those are part of my issue. How do we start to, when we feel like we've lost trust in ourselves, or feel like we can't trust ourselves, what's the first question we need to ask ourselves to get us back to a point of being able to be receptive to information that our energy is trying to give us?
Nice. Yeah. And so that's a place where, if I hear someone's like in that, what I imagine is going on there is that let's just say you are not sure you can trust what you're thinking, right? And so you might be sort of running through a list of things that you want to do, and there's a sense of like, how do I know that's true? How do I know that's true? And so I would personally call that guy apart, and I would say, so here comes my questioner. There's on the one hand a sort of frantic need to know, and a fear that, like, I'm going to get it wrong. And on the other hand, there's kind of an analyzer who's just bringing up sort of option after option, generating reports, so to speak, and saying, well, we could do this, we could do this. And what I would then say is, my imagining is that the reason why these guys, so if I'm in that body, if I'm in that experience, it's like, okay, I'm overwhelmed. Okay, I don't know what to do. Yes, I've had the experience of making a choice and it being wrong. So I know that I don't always know. What do I know? And then I might say, I know the body. I know my breath. I know. And so I would work to bring things back to a kind of elemental sense of calm, because this is the fundamental truth. When we say I've lost trust in myself, that's a story. And if I live that story, I'm beholden to the guy who wrote it in me. And he probably wrote it because he has an agenda, because underneath that story is the fundamental truth, that is, what do I trust? I trust my body. I trust the earth. I trust the process of unfolding. I trust the God of my understanding, or of a higher power, if that resonates for me. And for me personally, I trust my body. And so if I'm in that place where I'm saying, I heard what someone once say, and they were speaking in terms of, if you're going to be an activist for some cause, whatever it could be, it said, if you're getting into it and you think, I don't know what to do, right? And you're sort of like then you're already lost, because you've gotten caught up in this idea that you have to know what to do. And it's the same with this. I would say, if you're caught up in the story of, I don't trust myself, then fundamentally you're kind of lost, because you're living by the story that you have to know what the right answer is in order to proceed. And you don't. You can find your sense of embodied trust and go from there.
Is that another way of being caught by perfectionism? Is that
Totally.
like another because I've always been confused by perfectionism, because when I think of perfectionism, I'm thinking that everything has to be perfect with whatever it is you're working on, but not necessarily that everything has to be perfect within you. And it's just become sort of that insight recently in recent years, as I've dug deeper into myself, that what perfectionism really is you're just worrying for everything to be perfect, not just yourself, but everything to just give you permission to do something.
Well, that's a great insight. It is that perfectionist part, because if you're saying, I don't know what to trust, underneath that is a deeper story, as you're saying, is something like, I need to know that that what it is I'm going to do is going to be without risk, or without the possibility of failure, or without the possibility of making a mistake, or hurting someone, or hurting myself, or whatever. And perfectionists, a lot of times, this is the type of part in us that will have us say, well, I'm not going to launch the podcast until I have the perfect name and the perfect microphone and the perfect this or perfect that. And that's kind of what you were talking about. But then inside us, that same guy can go to work on a personal decision. I don't know what to do about this relationship. How do I know who to trust? And so it sort of freezes us. It freezes us. And like I say, the lie of that is that there is some truth to discover, rather than recognizing there is absolutely fundamental truth right now. And I have 100% have access to that. But it's not about me succeeding, or me solving my problems, or me getting away from pain. In fact, it may have to do with me feeling the discomfort of, oh shit, I don't know what to do, and I don't know what the right choice is, but can I be with that? Can I grok that discomfort? Then a way will open. It's almost like we have, again, back to attachment. We have to be uncompromised by our attachment to whatever the perfection of the outcome, or the whatever our particular hook is.
Does it stem from a lack of attachment that we start these processes? Because a lot of these stories that we tell ourselves start at a very, very early age, start right from the get-go, because we're indoctrinated into all kinds of stuff. And then we're also given all our ancestral stuff, and then our family stuff, and our parents' stuff that haven't, because I just turned 50. So like our parents, they weren't working on themselves like today. Right. And and then when you throw a severe persistent mental illness in one of your parents on top of that, that throws a whole lot of stuff on, and you throw addiction, you throw all kinds of stuff in, and trauma and all that kinds of stuff. Does it really stem from our lack of attachment to individuals that brought us, or is it a lack of attachment to ourselves, or is it too much attachment to ourselves that we're so afraid that we're like a deer in headlights?
Yeah, I mean, I think all sort of neurosis, or all of the ways that we get into our own way, and the ways that we've been discussing, all, you might say, all the kinks and problems under the hood, come from attachment. Here's how I think about it. If I have a perfectionist part, if I have a critical part, if I have let's just start with those two, right? If I have those going on, it may be that my parents had that. And so in a way, genetically, I come by it honestly. Like I've got an overactive brain, I've got a very analytical mind. I come in with these things, but then so that's the nature part. But then the nurture attachment part is you take that guy, that baby coming in with that genetics that's probably going to find a way to express itself. And ideally you'd want it to express itself in a useful way. But then the parents are disorganized in their own sort of sense of felt safety and are kind of, dropping the ball, so to speak, in moments. And our attachment, I'm sort of sticking myself into your framework, but it works in that sense of like having the experience as children of not being secure, of feeling that mom or dad is not sort of trustworthy, and just in an embodied place, a way of being wounded in that way. Now that fundamental sense of disorganized attachment is going to express itself through our particular genetics and our way of being. And so, what one guy might occur as sort of suicidal and morose and depressed, the next guy could occur as homicidal and calculating and analytical. Same wound, different expression. But yes, I think however we're expressing our particular crazy is coming from a fundamental, and that's why one of the sort of core steps of healing, in addition to what I said earlier, which is taking responsibility for the guys talking, which would be like, yes, I have a perfectionist. Yes, I have a critical guy. Yes, yeah, there I go again. And this is, again, so hard. It goes back to that other piece I said around self-compassion, because it touches the shame part, but we have to do it, is to be able to hold that little boy who was not held, who was, sort of tragically nurtured in those critical ways, and begin to nurture him and re-raise him and be with him. And above all, feel the wound and the just sort of awful pain that he feels for what he experienced. And then when we can do that, we can actually change history, and he can sort of become more mature and become a little bit more attached. And then you talked about being attached healthily to ourselves. And I think that's how we build that.
Where does fear begin? Is fear innate in all of us, and it's expressed more easily, or does it start from something? Does it start with again, like a lack of attachment or that? And because again, fear, I don't want to use fear in the thing, but where does fear begin?
I mean, I think you hit it there. Like, again, we can be some fearful people. Like, we can come in with a kind of tendency towards fear, but then have it sort of heightened by an early experience of being endangered in one way or another. So the more interesting question is, being with fear, how do we be with fear? And how do we be with fear? And my view, more or less, is face it, but face it in a way that isn't trying to be, that isn't reckless. I'm going to heroically take this plant medicine or this psychedelic and for once and for all face all my demons and my fears. Well, maybe, but maybe not. That might not be the right path for someone who is not totally ready for such a dive. And so where fear comes from, I mean, I think you're asking more in the individual, and it's like, yeah, those core experiences of being endangered. How we deal with it, though, is we have to take responsibility. One of the things that we might want to do is we want to blame our parents or whoever and say, well, I'm just a fearful person, or I don't do that because I want to get it right, or this or that. But at the end of the day, it's super tempting to blame our inability to get life right on something else rather than just saying like, wow, it's really my responsibility to deal with the ways that I'm scared. And that's just me. I'm not going to get it right. And that's a big step in maturity.
Maybe that's the ultimate fear, is that we're afraid we are going to get it wrong. Is that maybe the ultimate fear?
For some people, I mean, not everyone. You know, there are some that women are afraid of being, some women might be afraid of being physically vulnerable. Some others might be afraid of being left alone. Some men might be afraid of being harmed by other men physically. Some men might be afraid of being dominated, either intellectually or physically, or in other ways. You know, I mean, everybody has a different fear, and it depends on how we orient. But the one that you're sort of, it seems like, moving around or talking about is this fear of getting it wrong, or not having it right, or not knowing what to do. That particular fear probably has something to do with, you know, the message in your family. It might have been something like, if you don't get it right, then you're in trouble, or then we're gonna, the love is dependent on your ability to get it right, or something like that.
Well, it's almost transactional in a way, in a lot of things, like almost exactly. Looking at it, and it's almost set up a thing where everything is transactional. Like it's the pro bono, totally. You know, not the pro bono, but the
quid pro quo.
Yeah, there we go. And I should know this because I've heard that a million times. But yeah, exactly, the quid quo pro.
It almost sounds like it's always going back to that same, you mentioned before, the stories. You know, it seems like it always ends up going back to the stories that we tell ourselves.
Totally.
You know, whether it's fear, whether it's love, whatever it is, you know, whether it's goal setting. Well, I can't set this goal because I can't. And whatever that story is you're telling yourself is what is really seems to be the foundation.
Yeah. It's like, is the story based fundamental, like what we were talking about, so the sort of like subtext, like, is the story just fear in a story form, or is the fear a story I'm telling myself, right? Like I'm telling myself, like, I can't do this thing or this thing. Isn't that just me being scared of making a mistake? Or if I feel scared, isn't that just a story that's saying like, well, I have to get it right or else? And I think you guys are really, really cleverly finding your way into this sort of universal experience that men have and people have, of getting caught up in the sort of mishigas of our rational. And that's why I say to clients, like, it's not enough to just become aware of all this stuff. You have to go the next step, which is to take responsibility for it, and then to learn how to identify it, sit in it, apply it, and quiet it down. Like, peace is not a result. Like, you know, people will get to this point and they'll go, okay, I have all this fear and I have these stories, and then it's like, I can't get out of it. Well, then you have to, then we have to talk about how to find peace, how to find a sense of direction, how to find a sense of intention, because it's almost more painful to know the ways that we're crazy and not be able to sort of interrupt it. Yeah. And that's why, you know, go ahead.
I don't mean to interrupt you. I kind of tend to, this is a personal, I kind of, you know, when people like search for peace or search for happiness and looking for, and I try to,
totally.
I try to not say like, that's the destination. Like, peace isn't the destination. Let's make peace part of the journey.
Beautiful.
You know, totally. I just feel like, because you're always searching. And I think in this culture, you know, with the media and all this other, you know, extrinsic stuff happening, that's like, we're always searching for the better thing. We always want more, and you need a purpose. So go out there and find your purpose. And
right.
I think that can have adverse effects on some people.
Well, I couldn't agree more. I just said this to a client yesterday because he said to me something like, I'm exhausted from doing this. And, you know, I'm you know, broken up with this woman, and I'm not calling her, and I feel like I can't take it anymore. I'm in withdrawal and so on. And I said, what's one thing you can do to find a greater sense of peace? And I forget what he wrote back, but it was something like, it's basically like you're saying, like, well, peace is this thing that I'm going to get to. And I said to him, peace is not a result. Like, peace is an action right now. Because to get him to recognize that we make peace. The problem is people want the whole piece, and just take a piece of peace. That's all you need right now.
That's great. Take a piece of pizza. It's like
that's
pizza.
Good. You're right, though. I mean, that is great. That's we laugh, but that's good. I like that a lot, and I think there's a lot of truth to that for sure. Depending on where the person is and where, not only where they are, but where they are in their mind and on their journey.
Totally.
Yeah. I'm going to take a quick diversion off this for a minute, because I want to kind of find out about your groups, your men's groups. And
right.
Can you just tell us a little bit about like how they go and what your kind of goal is, I guess, and
Yeah, well, I don't have any going right now. I've been toying with doing one. I just had a baby. So, I mean, that was 18 months ago. So there I go with my own version of perfectionism. And it definitely is not perfect. But the groups I do online. I've done online format, and I do in person. For me, the goal of a group is to bring us into a kind of, it's like to bring us into a group experience. And why is a group experience helpful? Well, the group experience is going to give us, if we're able for it, if we're going to show up for it, if we're courageous enough to share, men normalizing how we are in our emotions, how we are in our struggles in life. And what I get interested in is how we are with each other, because so much of the sort of I almost say like the cultural problem is the story that we're propping up as men that is sort of maintained in the way that we project on each other. Like, he has it all together and I don't, or I'm scared of him, or look what he's doing. How dare he? I can't do that. But all this stuff, we sort of weaponize it and militarize it and take it underground. And then we end up sort of carrying out the big story of the patriarchy, which is this sort of separation, this fundamental belief that we're separate, and that therefore we have to gather our resources and protect ourselves from each other in all these ways: emotional, physical, mental. And what a men's group can do is help us to tear down that story of separation and begin to realize, I am just the same as you. You're just as insecure as I am. You're just as fearful. And then recognize that actually the project is not, for some reason I'm going in a kind of prepper direction, but it's like the project is not stockpiling food and bullets and getting ready. The project is breaking down the story that we're separate and being able to heal. Because the biggest thing the big culture doesn't want is for men to figure out that they don't have to fear other men. If we figured that out as individual men in a cultural basis, the whole thing would come crashing down. I think
it goes for both. I think it goes for women too, because I think that I can see that for both sides.
Totally.
And I think that's our biggest problem, is that we're so afraid of everyone, and we don't even know why we're afraid, or other people, or people have been fed stories of other people that make them fearful, and that makes them so fearful that they can't break down a wall to just extend a hand to say, yeah, what happened to you? Because I know it happened to me.
Connections,
community.
It's all about connections. That's right. And I've heard you speak a lot about community and in the stuff that I watched on YouTube and stuff. And that's obviously what you're all about, is trying to build a community.
Totally.
Tim and I always talk about tools, because we have bat belts, and we got to have the utility belt filled with different tools. I wanted to ask you, what is your either go-to, because you talk about a lot about getting quiet. Is meditation the first step, or is there something else? Is it a question that we need to ask ourselves to even get ourselves to the point of wanting to sit on the cushion, or sit wherever we are, or be wherever we are? Because it's about presence.
Yeah, meditation. If you asked me to go and get quiet, I would not go sit on a cushion. That doesn't work for me. What I would do is go for a walk in the hills. I would go for a walk in the mountains. I would go garden or do yard work for a couple hours, mowing the lawn, even anything repetitive outside with the body. That said, if what I can do that will work for that when I don't have access to that is breathe and move. And I will use embodiment as a way of quieting the mind by actually breathing and moving. It's another thing I do in my men's groups, but just so taking, for example, fear, beginning with fear. This is from the 5 rhythms, but just moving that through the body, and just beginning with inhale, like just, and like allowing the fear to move, like actually moving it from the head down into the fingers and the whole body, and actually moving in the space. And the sort of mantra is like, let the fear move, using that inhale, and 5 minutes of that. And you will find that whatever the fear or the story was that was gripping you has a whole lot less purchase, because now it's been given permission to move. And it's actually not a story. It's not an imperative. It's just, my old teacher, Adam Barley, said, fear is information that wants to move, and you've allowed it to move through the body. And now there's a whole different state that you're in.
Wow. That was a great, that was an awesome definition of fear. Love that. That was great.
Great conversation. I'm just thankful that we our roads kind of collided, and we were able to hook up with Pieter. This is, it's kind of rare to get 3 men together and talk mental health and feelings and emotions, and admit we have fears. So just having this conversation alone is I feel it's helpful.
Pieter, do you I'm sure maybe this has changed, maybe it's not, and maybe you've asked yourself this question many times because it's dependent upon the experience that you're having. But is there one fear that's played over all the other fears that you've noticed that comes up for you?
For me personally?
Yeah. And can we quantify one fear, or is there multiple layers? Is fear like an onion, just like our emotions, where there's different reasons or different levels of it, or different things wrapped up in it?
Yeah, I'm just trying to find where I've been scared or where I've had experienced fear recently, because you're asking for personal. And I do think that fear is, like you said, like an onion, like it's all connected, and it ultimately wants a kind of physical expression. It wants a kind of, like in a lot of men's work, what is a common thing to do is to expand our capacity to be with physical discomfort, because so breath work or extended sort of physical qigong holds, like a tree pose, or
my favorite standing meditation, man. I love tree pose. I love it.
Oh wow, great.
I do. Yeah, the 8 brocades is my go-to. If that's the only thing you learn from qigong, it's the best set of exercises it just grounds me, and it's awesome. The Badwa Jin is just like one of my favorite things.
Yeah, and so as you were saying that, it did remind me that I do have certain fears that occur, and they might be physical fears, like fears, of certain experiences, like physical discomfort, being too cold or being exposed, and that they are, or in relationship with my partner, there might be a fundamental fear of being left that I have to sort of find underneath it. And yeah, what's my relationship with those things? Obviously, I'm a white man with means in America. I'm not going to freeze to death. I'm not going to be left necessarily alone. I'm a 43-year-old man. So I have to find ways to extend those experiences if I'm interested in fundamentally growing my relationship to trust, growing my relationship to confidence, which to me is all ways of saying fear has less of a grip on me. And so physical fitness, all the things that we do as men to actively sort of expand our spirit and expand our physical presence, these things are all going to bring us into contact with fear, and how we can extend for just a little longer, how we can hang on for just a little. I mean, then this goes into pleasure as well, because our ability to be with intense pleasure is ironically related to how we are with intense discomfort and how we are with fear. Because when we are so interested in having that orgasm and so interested in having the tension broken, that is related to, in a weird way, how we are with discomfort. It's like, to be able to expand our ability to be with discomfort will have impacts both in our ability to manage fear and our ability to be more expansive and present lovers.
Now, because the one big fear that I felt for myself was becoming a dad. Like that was a huge fear for me, and I know now that you have an 18-month-old, you've been through this recently, and mine just turned. Mine is not a baby anymore, and she's not a teenager yet either. But I had a really big fear when I became a dad. I didn't like when I was first holding her. I was afraid I was gonna like hurt her or drop her or whatever. And I was kind of like expecting like, what was that like? Is this your first child? And what did that bring up for you, man? Like,
yeah,
because we're all parents here, so it's like there's a lot wrapped up in that cookie.
Well, I appreciate that question, because it reminds me of, the whole thing that I went through. At about 3 months, I started to have this anxiety that just came out of nowhere, and I didn't understand it. And somebody had shared with me, a buddy that he'd had that. And I just remember thinking, God, like, what, why? What are you scared of? What's wrong with you? Et cetera, et cetera. It's like, and I don't know if what I'm saying is true broadly for everybody, but it's like, what came up for me, I didn't understand. And I don't know where it came from. It came from where I couldn't really see, but I struggled with sleep for 6 or 9 months. And there were a number of nights where I didn't sleep the entire night and had this immense anxiety. And then had this really weird thing happened where I, just as I was falling asleep, right? Like I'd be exhausted. And just as I was falling asleep, something would jerk me and I'd wake up, and it was completely autonomous. I couldn't go like, oh, here comes that thing where I'm going to wake up. Let's just soften and relax. It was like, after I softened and relaxed, I fell asleep, I would wake up, which, I mean, I would happen all night until the morning, where I would be so cracked out that I would like literally be like on the couch at 5 a.m. finally going, oh, maybe I'll fall asleep now. And then I would wait. And it was scary. And facing that and meeting that, and I did not want, and I mean, it was a question of like, am I going to have to get on some anti-anxieties? Am I going to have to get on some drugs for this? What am I going to have to do? How do I deal with this? Man, it was a journey. And 18 months in, I guess, 15 months later from when it started, I'm good. And it's been a journey, man.
That's good to hear, man. Because sleep, as we know, we need sleep, and lack of sleep causes all kinds of issues, going from mental issues for sure, clarity, all that stuff. It's like sleep is, and what happens is we get ourselves into that cycle of not being able to fall asleep, and we just constantly, it's just the records keep dropping in the limbic jukebox. Why aren't I falling asleep? Can't I fall asleep? Why? It's brutal. Absolutely brutal. So I'm glad that you've been able to continue on the journey and find your way to the next road out of that, because that's important.
It still happens, like I still, like last night, he's up at 2 a.m. and I'm dealing with him. And then after I'm done dealing with him, I lay down, and there's always that voice that comes in. What if I can't get back to sleep? What if I can't get back to sleep? And it's like learning how to deal with that, and that's everything that we talked about, is like taking sort of hold of the parts and the voices and being able to settle them to return to a sense of calm and peace.
I love it. I love it. When did you start this journey? Did this journey stem from crisis? Were you obviously you were here in the capital region for college because you went to a
Mm-hmm.
local college here, RPI, if you don't mind me
Mm-hmm.
saying, because
Not at all.
we have a big presence in the 518 thanks to Nippertown. So any local connection we can make is always good. So it's awesome. Peter did go to RPI here in Troy, and where did your journey start? Did you, like I said, did you have a crisis? Was it something that was just always in you, and then somebody just happened to prompt you?
It's weird, it's one of these things that's like, I've often wondered about this, like what is it that had it be that I went on my journey, so to speak, and went on my journey and what I mean by going on my journey is beginning to want something more maybe than what I was given, or something other, or believe that there might be a personal sort of road for me, or a soul destiny, or some way of relating to reality that was more like the call to adventure rather than just the humdrum. And the way that I come to think about it is that, and it's also like, what the reason this question is interesting, I think, is because we all wonder, like, why me and not that guy, or why this and that, why didn't I wind up drunk or dead, or why didn't I wind up this way or that way, And like for me as a kid, my parents fought a lot, and I was diagnosed with ADD as a 7 or 8 year old and given Ritalin, and I was a bit of a mess at school, and didn't have a lot of friends, and grew up in a very rich town in New England, in Connecticut, near New York City, with a lot of investment bankers. And my parents were divorced. Most of the kids in school did not have divorced parents. One of the only divorced families. We were not rich. So we had a lot of things sort of going against us, plus my mental health stuff. I was sent to the nurse. And if I didn't, at lunchtime, and if I didn't go to the nurse would knock on the door, even in high school, with a little paper cup and say, Peter, could you come out into the hall and take your pill? And the other kids kind of making fun of me. And that sort of initial not vulnerability, like, I don't know what the word is, but it's like, I was not, I was not cool. I was not popular. It was not made an option for me to follow in the same sort of regular picket fence, Wall Street road that the other kids that I grew up with were offered. And so I was going to have to figure out what life meant for me. And looking at my own father, again, going back to the genetics piece and watching him deal with a lot of the same issues, I looked at him and I thought, okay, or I looked at myself and I thought, okay, I've got ADD, probably somewhat started from listening to my parents screaming at each other at the top of their lungs when I was 7 or 8 years old, trying to go to sleep. Why did that happen? Well, it happened because mom and dad don't like each other. Okay, well, why'd they get married? Well, they got married because they met each other. Well, wait a minute. My dad felt like he had to have a kid because he wanted to get his life right because he hated his job. Okay, so he started with the wrong job. And so I sort of like followed it all the way back, and I said, got it. So the first thing I have to do is figure out what I want to do. And then I can find the right partner, and then all the things, like everything flows out from that. And so I became obsessed with finding my quote unquote purpose. And after 20 years of failing to find it, I finally realized I could help other people. And so I said,
That's awesome.
I was my own first client.
Yeah, there you go. But isn't that the school though? I mean, the school of life is that we're the petri dish, and we have to figure out ourselves before we can even help anybody else. And that was the whole reason why this started. Like Tim and I started this because we both came through our own mental health crises and journeys, and it was just something. And there's a little bit of selfishness because we wanted to learn more, and that's the best way to learn is to teach. So the best way to learn and teach is to bring other people in and learn from them, and have your teachers be people like yourself, man.
Totally. I mean, there's a lot of need out there.
Absolutely,
there's a lot of need. I went to high school with a lot of people who, a lot of them are great, a lot of them are fine, a lot of them are not going to need to go on this journey, maybe. And that's fine. You could argue that that's a tragedy, and you could argue that that's fine. But there are people who are going to come to these big questions, and they're going to look around and say, who can walk alongside me while I figure this out? Because it's not, you don't find it, looking around. It's not, people don't want to talk about it. People don't want to deal with it. It's the thing that people would rather ignore. And that's why it's so sort of weird to even start to have those questions about, like, who am I and where am I? And what, I had a friend who again, I was not in Wall Street, but I had a couple friends in Wall Street, and I had a friend who was the captain of the basketball team, most popular guy, all the girls, this and that. I mean, everything that I wasn't. I mean, to even talk to him in high school would have been like, I don't think he'd even talk to me. But we're friends of friends. And so after that, talked to him a few years after, and he said to me, I could never do what you did. I admire what you've done, and I admire the questions that you've asked and the ways that you've gone, but I could never have done that. He said, if I ever let on to the guys at my work that I was thinking about things like you, they would eat me alive, and I would never be let back in. And he worked on a trading desk in downtown Manhattan. And I was like, wow, I really appreciated that, because I felt like, hey, here's the captain of the basketball team telling me, the loser who takes Ritalin, is inspiring to him. But he's also revealing to me that even with all of his resources and all of his popularity and his money and all these things, that he doesn't have the courage to follow his own star. Wow. That's
mind blowing right there. Absolutely, it is. And it makes you realize that, wow, you've actually created a whole path for yourself on your own, and obviously the right path.
Well, I had less to lose in a way. And that was what I was saying earlier, is that I wasn't offered the sort of traditional road. But yes, I did take courage at certain moments to choose certain things that were unconventional. And I'm grateful that I did.
It's been awesome talking to you, man. I don't want to keep up your whole day. Timmy, is there anything else you want to wrap up with Pieter before we start the lightning round? I think you'll have fun with the lightning round.
Oh, the lightning round. I didn't know about the lightning round.
No, man, let's just jump into it. And
all right.
Yeah. But I'll just say before we dive in that it's been a real pleasure with you guys. I'm so impressed by both of you, and just a lot of gratitude for taking time with me.
Thank you, man. Thank you for sharing your time with us, man. Thank you for taking time away from your baby and your sleep. Because like I said, man, I should have realized, I should have looked and said, oh, he's in Colorado. We got to make this a little bit later.
It's all good.
It's what we do, and I think it's how we do it. It's making the connections and meeting new people. So it's all part of it. All right. So we're gonna dive right in here. Okay. Do you have a favorite or a least favorite word?
A least favorite word or favorite word? I don't know what my favorite word. Let's see. I like the word numinous, and I don't like the word inconvenient. Where that came from.
There you go. That's all right. That works.
That's awesome. I've this middle question has always been about animals, because animals are a really big part of a lot of our lives, and animals are like children and everything. But I'm like jazz. I like to improvise, so I changed this question up now with everybody. Mm-hmm. But I've been sticking to this a little bit recently with some of our guests, because it seems to get them to open up about something else. On this journey that you've been on in this path, what is one thing that you've learned about your capacity that you didn't know you had before you started this?
Well, I guess I didn't know that I had a capacity to be with fear. I didn't know that I had a capacity to improvise. It's funny that you say that, to be with a situation without knowing how to get through it, to kind of just feel my way along. I didn't know that I had a capacity to, I'm just going to use the word empathy, to be with myself or another man's experience in a way that was transformational, like not in a way that was a burden to me or that was sort of departing from my own self, but that was actually finding more consciousness. Like all of these things, as I found them, were kind of like secret hacks that I didn't have as a kid.
That makes like perfect sense, actually. I totally relate to that.
Thank you.
So the last question is, if there was something that you could do or that you would like to see done for mental health as a whole without any kind of restraint, what would it be?
The word that comes to me is death. I think that the big bad beast that's lurking is our fear of death. And we have a culture that is, since you asked me to wave a magic wand, sort of culturally, I would be it for us to look at and engage with and embrace our death, our inevitable death, personally, but also the concept of death, the limit that it provides. I'm not, whether you like Elon Musk or not, one thing that I liked about him is somebody asked him, like, do you want to have people live forever? And he said, no, I think it's a good idea that we die because we need new ideas. And that was like, wow, that's refreshing, because people like him are usually all about like life extension and living forever. But if we could, as a culture, truly get the sort of, I'm going to say, beauty of what death is and how to relate to death, it would transform on down every other mental health thing, because so much of what we're trying to keep propped up, I think, is ultimately our fear of dying and our fear of losing control and our fear of surrendering to the sort of wild at the edge of the forest that we don't want to, that we've pretty much stamped out of every aspect of our society, but is still there. And if we could get rid of it and upload ourselves to the internet, we would. Not me. I mean, we all would. In a way, that's like the sickness we're all running from. And so to center death is how I would do it.
Wow. It's not very often that we talk about death, although it's become a little bit more prevalent in my conversations with myself recently, just because I've realized that I'm not afraid of death anymore. When you get well, it's just that I wanted to kill myself in 2013.
Wow.
And I think that when you get to a certain part in that journey, death isn't really scary. I think the thing that scared me the most, and I've said this to Timmy before, is that trust in myself, that I can trust myself to make the right decisions upon my journey and not keep. Well, and again, it comes to making mistakes and what we tell ourselves about the mistakes, because it's those cognitive distortions again.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm more afraid of not living than I am of dying.
Nice. That's beautiful. Yeah, and it's an incredible gift to others to that what you can put out from that place of consciousness.
You try. I'm a work in progress, just like the rest of us. My road is still being, there's a lot of road work going on. There's a lot of construction here, but at least the construction is positive. I can see the benefits from it, and the roads are opening up.
Nice. That's great.
Thanks again, Peter, for joining us today and having this conversation.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you, Tim, and thank you, Will.
You got it, Peter. You can find Peter at petervw.com. Peter's got stuff up on YouTube. Is your YouTube the same, Peter VW, or is it?
I don't know what my YouTube is. I don't really post to it too much.
Okay. I looked it up by your full name, and then the videos and stuff popped up.
If you type in my full name into Google or YouTube, there's probably links on my website. But a lot of the videos and stuff and articles are on my website. So
awesome. You can check out Peter if you're interested in consultation with him, a coaching session. Peter, it's been awesome. Congratulations on your new baby boy. I mean,
thanks,
18 months is a little bit not quite new, but the newness never wears away. There's always something new for these babies. So
it's such a pleasure. I have such respect for you guys, and just really heartwarming to spend time with you. Thank you both for your work, and keep it up.
You're very welcome,
Awesome.
man. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, you betcha.
Have a great day. All right.
All right. Thanks.
Till next week.
Be well.
Be safe.
All right.
Be above.
Thank you for giving us a listen. New episodes every Wednesday. If you listen on Apple Podcasts, you can share, rate, review, and even subscribe so you'll never miss an episode. Other ways to support the show: follow us on social media, share the content, share our episodes. You can also buy us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/abovegroundpod. For further concerns, show ideas, or just to say hi, you can email us at abovegroundpodcast@gmail.com. Once again, thank you for listening and supporting mental health. Keep the conversation going and stay above.